Egypt widened the Suez Canal back in 2015, and container ships still run aground. Against all expectations, the wider the canal becomes, the more vulnerable it turns out to be. The real reason isn't the sand. 220,000 tons of steel, cargo and fuel stand frozen between two walls of water in the desert. On both sides of the canal, nothing but desert. No port, no city, no forest, just a flat horizon. Through this thin blue thread in the scorching sands flows 12% of all the world's maritime trade. This is where, in the planet's narrowest engineering artery, a paradox emerges. This channel physically cannot be widened. And yet the excavators keep working around the clock. Why did the sand around it turn out to be more valuable than the water in the canal itself? To understand the scale of the problem, you need to see the numbers. 193 kilometers, the full length of the Suez Canal. It connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea, cutting straight through the narrow isthmus between the continents of Africa and Asia. Without it, a tanker from the Persian Gulf to Rotterdam has to sail all the way around Africa past the Cape of Good Hope. That's an extra 6,000 nautical miles of travel and nearly 3 additional weeks on the open ocean. Every single day, cargo worth roughly $10 billion at global prices passes through this canal. And every hour of downtime is measured in 400 million. The planet lives on the schedule of a thin strip of water. In March of 2021, the world saw what happens when that schedule breaks down. The container ship Ever Given, 400 meters long, turned sideways across the canal and blocked it for 6 days. In just these few days, a $54 billion hole has opened up in global trade. 370 ships lined up in a queue. Oil prices jumped. German factories were left without components. London supermarket shelves stand empty. One ship, one gust of wind gone wrong, 6 days of global paralysis. Such is the true price of a single engineering artery of the planet, one that simply has no backup and never could. If these engineering feats amazed you, subscribe. More films are coming on how humans conquer nature. But this very thread physically cannot become any wider. In 2015, Egypt declared victory. The president personally launched a massive project called the New Suez Canal. The promises sounded grand. A full doubling of capacity. Annual revenue was expected to grow from $5 to $13 billion, nearly tripling in a short period of time. Waiting times for vessels were supposed to drop from 18 hours down to 11. They promised a completely new era. In a record 12 months, instead of the planned 3 years, 500 million cubic meters of dry earth were excavated. $8 billion in national bonds. 1.5 million workers, military excavators, flags, fireworks, and a national triumph. But behind the facade of impressive numbers lay one inconvenient engineering fact that almost no one talked about. Out of 193 kilometers of the canal, a true second track was built along only 35 kilometers. Another 23 miles were merely widened within the existing channel, deepening the old bypasses near the Bitter Lakes. Everything else, the entire southern half of the canal, remained a single-track narrow route, just as it was and still is today. Large ships still physically can't pass each other there. They wait their turn in the Bitter Lakes. Like a train waiting at a siding on a single-track railway line, a vast fleet obediently comes to a halt in the middle of the scorching desert. The first serious contradiction emerges. Marketing insistently spoke of doubling, but geology silently told a very different story. The real reason is hidden deep beneath the canal floor. To understand this limit, we need to go back in time. In 1869, Frenchman Ferdinand de Lesseps opened the first Suez Canal through the desert. The construction itself took 10 long years. It wasn't machines doing the work, it was people, 1.5 million Egyptian fellaheen. Peasants dug into the hard earth with simple pickaxes and woven baskets under the scorching Sahara sun, without any machinery at all. According to various estimates, between 120,000 and 150,000 ordinary Egyptian workers lost their lives. The width of the first historic canal at the bottom was only 22 meters, the depth just 8 meters. Only small wooden steamships of the distant era could pass through it, not the modern giants of today. Over a century and a half, the canal has been rebuilt more than 10 times, deepened, widened, straightened, yet each time they came up against the same feature of the terrain. The channel floor isn't solid rock. It's soft marine silt, layers of quicksand, shifting sand, and salty clays, a material that won't hold its shape when stood upright. This is where an ancient law comes into play: the angle of repose. Any pile of loose material has a limiting angle at which it stops crumbling and settles into place. For dry sand, that's 30 degrees. For wet marine silt underwater, just 15. If you dig a vertical wall 24 meters deep, within a few days it will turn into a gentle slope 90 meters long. The channel walls literally flow back into the water, and from this follows a strict engineering rule of dredging. To get 1 meter of width at the bottom, you need to remove 6 meters from the surface along the entire length. To make the channel even 50 meters wider, the strip will have to be expanded by 300 meters. This isn't an expansion, it's building the canal a second time, from scratch. And this is where the hydrodynamics come in. The naive version goes like this: dig it wider, send ships in both directions. Problem solved. Reality is far more complex. When a massive container ship moves through a narrow channel, the water beneath its hull behaves in unusual ways. It compresses, accelerates, loses pressure. The vessel sinks lower. Engineers call this phenomenon squat. For a vessel the size of the Ever Given at a speed of just 8 knots, the squat can reach up to 2 meters. This means the keel gets closer to the muddy bottom than what's shown on nautical charts. But sinkage isn't the only enemy. There's a treacherous shoreline pull effect known as the bank effect. When the hull passes close to one side of the channel, the flow of water between the hull and the bank speeds up. The pressure drops. The ship is sucked toward the bank, while the bow swings the opposite way. The tanker pivots sideways across the channel. That is exactly what happened to the Ever Given during a strong crosswind. The ship turned sideways across the canal. And here we arrive at a counterintuitive conclusion. If you make the channel wider, the bank attraction effect doesn't disappear, it changes. A transverse wave appears, reflecting off the opposite wall. The vessel begins to rock, the autopilot loses its footing, and the pilot compensates with the rudder. Every degree of correction adds more sag. Hydrodynamics limits the usable width of the channel from below, and surprisingly, from above as well. Too narrow won't do, the vessel loses control, but too wide is dangerous too, if the walls are soft and sloped. But that's still not the project's main obstacle. Let's go deeper into the very geology of the Sinai Peninsula itself. The eastern shore of the canal lies on an active tectonic fault. This is where the northern extension of the East African rift system runs. The earth slowly pulls apart, the rock strata are under strain, and groundwater carries dissolved salt that eats away at the concrete reinforcements along the banks. It seeps into the pores of the sandstone, causing it to crumble. A rigid wall loses its strength within 15 to 20 years. Another trap is the Great Bitter Lake. It sits in the middle of the canal, where ships wait out oncoming convoys. But this is no ordinary lake, it's a natural silt trap. Sediment from both sides settles right here. Every year, millions of cubic meters of sludge must be scooped from the bottom, or the shipping channel would simply vanish beneath the sediment. Expanding the lake isn't an option. The annual dredging workload would jump immediately, and the economics would start to eat itself alive. On top of the geology came financial pressure. The 2015 project was funded through the issuance of Egypt's national certificates. Citizens were buying bonds at 12% annual interest, and by 2023, the debt had grown to $9 billion. And that's just the principal. The canal's capacity has grown, but its revenues never managed to double. The pandemic disrupted logistics. The Red Sea crisis hit twice. Houthi attacks forced some vessels to reroute around Africa. The forecasts didn't match reality. At the same time, serious regional competitors appeared on Egypt's horizon.
Israel, the Emirates, and Saudi Arabia are discussing a land corridor, a network of railways and pipelines running across the Arabian Peninsula. The route will run from the port of Jebel Ali to the Mediterranean Sea. It won't fully replace the canal, but it will definitely take over part of the container traffic. Every stolen container is $10,000 less in transit fees. Every 10th one is critical to Egypt's budget. But here's the problem. Egypt needs revenue today, not a 15-year construction project with an unpredictable payback horizon. Expanding the entire southern half of the canal was estimated at $25 billion and 15 years of continuous dredging work. A country with inflation approaching 30% simply cannot afford a budget like that. And so, the engineers had to make a compromise. About the compromise, no one talks about out loud. In the summer of 2023, the Suez Canal Authority quietly launched a new project. No presidential ribbon cutting, no fireworks. It's called, quite simply, the expansion of the southern section of the second bore. The plan involves extending the second track another 10 kilometers to the south and deepening the fairway to 24 meters, plus widening of the narrowest points between Suez and the Bitter Lakes by roughly 40 meters of extra fairway width. Notice the numbers. Not a double channel along its entire length, just 10 kilometers of duplication and a localized deepening.
The cost about $400 million. The timeline 2 years. That's 60 times cheaper than an honest doubling. What does this pinpoint operation give us? According to the engineers' calculations, an extra 6 to 8 vessels per day added to the throughput. Not a doubling, not a revolution, just a bit more capacity at the most vulnerable point along this route. It was the Ever Given incident that triggered this quiet reform. The world watched a stranded container ship and demanded answers. Egypt responded not with loud promises, but with small, precise pockets of workaround at the most critical points along the route. This is a fundamentally different engineering approach. Instead of a second channel, bypass expanders at the points where traffic flows intersect. Instead of doubling the depth, targeted deepening precisely where the world's largest vessels run aground.
Instead of rebuilding the banks, heavy stone mattresses are laid where hulls have already been scraping the canal bed. Engineering has stopped fighting the river. Now it works with the current. But our pockets are hitting an invisible limit. Let's put the three ceilings together. The first is geological. The channel floor is silt, quicksand, and loose salt. Widening the canal without endless reinforcement work is impossible. Every meter of added width demands 6 meters of excavated soil, and still the walls will keep sliding back into the water. The second ceiling is hydrodynamic, pure physics of motion. Even a channel a kilometer wide won't save them. Container ships will squat down, sway, and get pulled toward the banks. The usable width is limited not so much by the water itself as by the physics of a massive body moving through a viscous fluid. The third ceiling is economic. Egypt cannot afford a 15-year construction project without guarantees of future global traffic. There's no guarantee that 15 years from now, global trade will actually follow this route. Hence the paradox that people rarely say out loud. You can't literally widen the channel. You can only optimize it. Egypt now says not meters, but transit time. Not the width of the fairway, but a precise schedule of ships. Two-way traffic wherever possible. One caravan travels on one day, the oncoming one the next. Smart pilot escort, strict speed limits, mandatory tugboats for vessels above a certain size.
All of this boosts the channel's capacity by tens of % without a single extra cubic meter of excavated soil. The answer to the headline is unexpected. They're not widening the canal itself, they're expanding its traffic schedule. And still, what if the next blow comes not from the water at all? While Egypt deepens its channel by mere centimeters, the world is charting alternative routes on a truly grand scale. Routes that no one on the planet could have even dreamed of 150 years ago. The first and main competitor is the Arctic Northern Sea Route along Russia's coast. Russia's coastline along the Arctic Ocean is becoming increasingly passable due to the rapid retreat of the ice. From Murmansk to Yokohama, Japan through the Arctic, 40% less time compared to the Suez route. The first container ships of the reinforced ice class have already made this journey on their own without an icebreaker escort. Within 20 years, the Northern Sea Route may become a fully year-round transportation corridor. The second scenario, the Ben Gurion Canal, a hypothetical canal running through the territory of the State of Israel. The idea has been discussed since the 1960s. The route would connect the Red Sea across the Negev Desert to the Mediterranean. Technically possible, politically extremely difficult. Economically, estimates range from $55 to $100 billion. For now, this is more of a geopolitical bargaining chip than an actual project, but the mere discussion of it is already putting pressure on Egypt. The third shift, autonomous convoys. Within the next 10 years, most container ships will be run by algorithms. Artificial intelligence will be able to guide ships through the canal more densely, faster, and more precisely than any human. Again, this doesn't widen the riverbed, but it multiplies the throughput many times over without a single shovel. Egypt is already building a new dispatch center in Ismailia, featuring machine vision systems and radar integration. And looming over all of this is a fourth factor, the climate. Mediterranean seawater is steadily seeping into the Nile Delta. Sea levels are rising, destroying coastal structures and reshaping the very hydrology of the ancient canal for decades to come. On the other hand, salt dunes and encroaching sands constantly threaten the very body of this engineering structure. Every decade demands more and more money just to keep the channel the way it is today. The next decade will decide who replaces the Suez, or saves it from slow oblivion by history. If these engineering solutions amazed you, the channel has more films about how humanity conquers nature. The next video is the story of an Arctic route that could reshape global trade more than any Suez project ever has. Subscribe to continue the journey. There are many more stories ahead.